Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining my channel. Today, we're going to talk about the book by the legendary Cheikh Anta Diop, or Diop, uh, Cultural Unity of Black Africa. So we're going to get right into it, right? Cultural Unity of Black Africa, the domains of patriarchy and of matriarchy in classical antiquity. So this is going to be just a quick book review and breakdown. I'll post a link down below, but please take time right now to hit that thumbs up button, and of course consider supporting the channel by utilizing the links below. So this is just a quick table of contents, so you get the historical account of matriarchy. I like to call this the double cradle theory, and you'll see why in a few minutes. Chapter 2 is a criticism on the classical theory of a universal matriarchy. Chapter 3, history of patriarchy and matriarchy. And then chapter 4, anomalies noticed in the three zones and their explanation. Then chapter 5, a comparison of other aspects of the northern and meridional cultures. So we're going to get right into it. First of all, for those of you who might not know who Cheikh Anta Diop is man, he is like basically like the father, if you will. I'm not gonna say that, but he's definitely one of the pioneers of just like Afrocentric approaches to the study of history, right? Instead of looking at everything in the Eurocentric light, he was definitely one of the first, right, really legitimate scholars, right? Not just somebody talking without doing proper research, right? What I like about Diop's work is that he put in the rigor. You can read his work, and there's bibliographies, there's references, the sources that you can go and check. So whether you agree or disagree, you can at least look at his sources. It's not just speculation. There's not these logical flaws in the works, because that's how it has to be when you're presenting any type of theory, especially when it flies in the face of what is supposed to be established. You have to be able to back it up with the rigor in the form of bibliography, primary sources, so that people can go and check for themselves and not just have to take your word for it. So Cheikh Anta Diop was born in 1923, passed away in 1986, hails from Senegal. All right, and he was just brilliant. He received his early education in Islamic and French schools in Senegal. Of course, Senegal was a colony of France, and this is why he speaks fluent French, as you can see from some videos that you might peruse on YouTube. He moved to Paris in 1946, and he studied a wide range of subjects. I mean, he was basically like a Renaissance man: physics, chemistry, linguistics, anthropology, sociology. At the prestigious Sorbonne University. So again, he went to a top level school that's respected worldwide. It wasn't like he got one of these online degrees today and is running around acting foolish, calling himself a doctor. All right, so he had the title, and he also had the ability to back up everything he was saying. And what he did was that he opened the door for a lot of scholars after him, a lot of black scholars, a lot of African scholars after him, to challenge a lot of colonial and downright racist narratives in some areas. And if you were to ask me what was his most significant contribution, I would say that it was his argument that ancient Egypt, okay, which often viewed as part of the Near East or Middle East, right? There's a lot of wordsmithing that goes along, but the idea is to kind of separate Egypt, if you will, from the rest of Africa. So to me, his major contribution was that ancient Egypt, right, was fundamentally African civilization, right? We don't want to hear this talk, oh, it's the Middle East and all of this, these made up terms. No, the pyramids are in Africa. The Sphinx is in Africa. This is his fundamental, to me, his greatest contribution is that he argued that the ancient Egypt was fundamentally African. All right, and his work, Nations, Negroes, and Culture, 1954. It's in French, of course. He demonstrated that the African origins of ancient Egyptian civilization, all right, and then he linked that to other African cultures, creating, a unity of the continent, especially in terms of language, religion, social structure. And his thesis asserted that Egypt was part of a broader cultural and historical development of Africa and should not be separated from the continent's history. All right, which was the prevailing viewpoint at the time. And of course, his research was, you guessed it, highly controversial at the time. Because why? It contradicted the prevailing Eurocentric view that distanced Egypt from its African roots. Okay, he argued that Africa's historical and cultural contributions had been downplayed or erased, all right, by racist scholarship, all right, the colonial mindset, right? These Negroes couldn't have done it. It's too advanced. There's no way. It must be another theory, right? He shot all of that down. He challenged it, all right. So his work on the cultural unity of Africa and the connections between ancient Egyptian and sub-Saharan, so I like to say so-called sub-Saharan African civilizations, was revolutionary. And of course, since it gained widespread recognition, so a lot of these authors, that came after him, the Ivan Van Sertima's, right, the Dr. Joseph Ben Yohanans of the world, right, they all kind of come from the tree of Cheikh Anta Diop, right, for his so I just wanted to give people a chance to find out, that didn't know who he was, didn't know some of his, his background, to know that we're talking about a giant here, and that he authored several different books. And here we're just looking at one, The Cultural Unity of Black Africa. All right. So what is this about? The Cultural Unity of Black Africa is a work that explores the cultural connections, of course, between African societies despite their apparent diversity. And this is what intrigued me when I first read this several years ago, was that there's so much emphasis always placed on the divisions, the divisiveness in Africa. Always, right? These people are divided from these people. Oh, there's the Muslim, there's the Christians over here. There's this tribe, there's tribal conflicts. That's what's put out there in the media. The constant emphasis on division, right? All of these man-made borders between people who look exactly alike and have the same culture, right? These are all remnants of colonialism, right? These borders weren't made by these people. They were put there by the conquerors, and unfortunately still remain today, because although the conquerors might be gone physically, a lot still remains mentally and economically, all right, behind the scenes. But this work, right, is about the cultural connections among African societies despite their apparent air quotes diversity. All right, so central to his thesis in this book is that Africa's cultural unity is deeply rooted in matriarchal heritage. So that's what this book is about. Matriarchy, matrilineal systems versus patrilineal system. That's like a big portion of this book. Um, and I like to call this the double cradle theory, and I'll explain later. So so he believes that the matriarchal heritage shaped the social, political, and religious structures of African civilization. All right, so he contrasts the matrilineal system with the patrilineal system of the northern cradle. So he calls like the African um, area like the southern cradle, like Africa, Australia, like those areas, the southern cradle, and he calls like Europe and some parts of Asia the northern cradle. So he believes that there are like two different systems: the matrilineal system, which prevailed down in the southern cradle, and in the northern cradle, the patrilineal systems prevailed. All right. So first, he starts out by critiquing the classical theories, okay, of a universal transition from matriarchy to patriarchy, and it was posited by scholars at the time like Frederick Engels, Lewis Morgan, J.J. Behofen, and they claim that all of human societies followed this basic evolutionary path from matriarchy to patriarchy. Um, but Diop challenged the notion, and he argued that hey, there were two distinct cradles of civilization which evolved independently, and that's why I call it the double cradle theory. So the southern cradle, right, primarily matrilineal, which was exemplified by African societies, and then there was the northern cradle, which was patrilineal, found in Europe and some parts of Asia. And he asserts that the matriarchy in Africa was not some primitive stage of development, but it was a complex and stable social system and persisted long after patriarchal systems dominated the North. One of the central features of this southern cradle was its reliance on the maternal line for kinship and inheritance. All right, and this system granted women significant power and influence, and I would say also respect. One thing I would like to say about the matrilineal system is that when it comes to the identity, right, of the parents, which system is better? It has to be the matrilineal system because you can actually see the child come out of the woman, so to speak, at birth. So there is no controversy. Hey, who's that? Who is that child related to? Who is that child's mother? You can see, hey, the wives maids or the midwives, what have you, they're right there witnessing the birth of the child, and you know for a fact. I don't care if it's 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. You see that child peek his or her head out of the womb. You know that's that child's mother. Conversely, in a patrilineal system, you never know who the father is. Right? Think about it. Just even in 2024, we hear that um, probably 30% of men in this country, in the United States, that is, are walking around taking care of kids, paying child support for kids that they think are theirs, that are not theirs. And this is with DNA testing in existence. So imagine in a patrilineal system, right, where the man basically had to take the woman's word for it. Hey, this is your child. How many of those children, right, these lineages that we have with these kings and queens, how many of these children are born of affairs, right, adulterous situations, etc.? There's no way that someone, say you're married to the king or something like that, you're not gonna say, hey, this child might not be yours, so you can get your head cut off. No way. You're gonna say, yeah, it's yours. They might have slept with a general or slept with a servant or something like that and got knocked up. And with the patrilineal system, there's no way to determine if even though the child might take on your name, there's no way to determine 100% that that child is yours as a man. So to me, this shows the superiority of the matrilineal system as far as that's concerned. You know exactly who is the parent of that child, right? When you give the child that last name, you know that is accurate. All right. So moving on. So um, so he demonstrates how African societies had developed around agricultural economies, where women um, played the role as cultivators, and they had roles in both the family and community life. In contrast, in the northern cradle, right, just think, right, temperature, harsher climates, right, they had more of a nomadic existence, warlike existence. They basically had to go follow, where the food was, right? Like follow animals and constantly on the move. So you can read about this with the Germanic tribes, right? If you read the book, the Germania by Roman historian Tacitus, you read a lot of this stuff. These people moved just basically they were like moving, like sagebrush across the desert or something like that. Just wherever the food was, wherever they moved. There was no farm. There was no farming going on or things like that. Agriculture, right? So it's a nomadic, warlike existence, and this is what Diop believed developed the patriarchal structures that place men in positions of authority over both family and state. It was more of like the might makes right mentality. The strongest will rule. Excuse me. The strongest will rule mentality. Excuse me. All right, I had to get some water, man. Um, he also explores the conflict between the northern and southern cradles, particularly in regions like the Mediterranean, right? So he uses Egypt for an example, as a society where both the matrilineal and patrilineal elements existed simultaneously, and he gives several examples um, of this going on. And he says that although you had the introduction of patrilineal systems, there was still a heavy influence of matriarchal values. So, for instance, you could have a queen um, like Hatshepsut, right, being a female, but being a pharaoh at the same time and wearing the full regalia at the same time. So you had this kind of period where things were transitioning, but you still had this clinging to the matrilineal system, even though things were starting to shift toward the patriarchy. All right, so and that's the basic gist of the book, is this comparison and contrast between the two systems of the matrilineal system and the patriarchal system. All right, and basically Diop calls for a revival of this matriarchal heritage as means of reclaiming the continent's cultural unity and dignity. Right? Basically what he's saying is, hey, patriarchy isn't our like natural way to be, natural system. All right? And he says that basically that patriarchal systems are a foreign, a foreign thing, a foreign system that's been imposed upon Africa through colonization, and especially through the spread of religions like Christianity and Islam, and that it disrupted the traditional social order to Africa. And so Diop is saying at this time, in order to move forward, right, that Africa must first recognize its shared cultural roots, and this is the key to building up a strong, unified, independent continent, or like I like to say, the United States of Africa, right? So, in a nutshell, I would say that it delivers an argument for the cultural unities, a strong argument that is for the cultural unity of African societies, right? And this is rooted in the matrilineal lineage. He analyzes historical, ecological, social factors that shape the development of the matrilineal and the patrilineal systems in the different cradles. And then he gives a unique perspective on Africa's place in world history, right? And then he just basically says, hey, come on back home to matrilinealism, if that's a word. and it emphasizes the importance of basically getting back to who who you are, um, as a people, right? And so that's the basic gist of this book. Like I said, I'll provide the links below there. I would love to hear you in the comments if you have read this book, or if you have your own take on it. There's a lot in there. Again, it's just a book review, so I didn't want to get like too deep and start breaking down like chapter by chapter. But that's basically the gist of it, is that this idea of the double cradles and matrilineal system, patrilineal system, and that that basically that the matrilineal system is our the African natural system, and that this is based on a number of factors. So let me know what you think in the comments below, and I look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for taking the time to listen, and I'll see you guys on the next video.